Hello and welcome back to JLXP, the Josh Leesman Experience. I am Jatt. It is after week 5 of the LCS, LEC, and like week 3 of the LCK because they decided to start their season late. We're here to give quick thoughts on what happened in the LCS on week 5, a little bit of LEC, and today, for the first time, welcoming Crumbz to the JLXP.
Yay.
How you doing?
Great. Finally on the Joshua Leesman Experience.
Yeah.
And I'm excited to cover a lot of these topics because you go really in depth in a lot of these things.
We can. That's the nice thing about this is like most of them end up being like 45 minutes, but it can be an hour, it can be 30 minutes. One thing that I think Prawley enjoyed doing when he was on here a couple weeks ago was like you just came off the analyst desk for the day. And a lot of times you'll have a 3-minute segment or something and you won't get to a point that you really wanted to talk about.
Yeah.
So that's like, all right, is there anything during the day that you didn't get to talk about? And I know you wanted to talk about team composition scaling, which I want to put on hold for a little bit because I think it's a better conversation towards the end of the episode. And I mean, my first reactions from this day, as usual, I'm almost kind of getting tired or complacent of this take is how dominant C9 is. Another 2-0, but had the cool support Senna with Vulcan's Tom Kench. What are your updated thoughts on C9 after week 5?
So I said this on the desk and we didn't get to say it on the show, but
Okay.
I can now understand why Sneaky did not want to compete for his role because Sven is looking like an absolute monster. He is so good on AD. It's actually crazy because he plays so safe, yet the meta seems to really favor these very safe players with champions like Senna, the Ezreal that's now coming back. And they're working so well together. So I think a lot of it comes down to a difference in bottom lane that the former Cloud9 just did not have in a player that is, I think, a little bit more stable or offering what the maybe older Sneaky would have.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because in 2019, Sneaky didn't necessarily play aggressively, right? They were mainly in bot playing weak side for the jungler to go elsewhere. They are able to play a little bit more strong side if necessary, but it kind of just feels like Sven and Vulcan are just a strict upgrade versus the bottom lane, like regardless of how the rest of the map is playing around them.
They're winning lanes just on their own from their own matchups, and it's not like they're overextending to make plays. They're just utilizing what their champions have at times where their opponent are not expecting it, like the Roman to the top side today, where Sin and Tom Kench interrupt the 1v1 between Set and Vlad. Like, I don't think that's a play that I would have seen from last year's Cloud9 that often. I think they would have just likely waited for a 1v1 to happen, then resume the fight and maybe push down the turret, not try to get there when the fight is happening. And that kind of trust in each other and trying to help each other out is something that is appearing a lot more for them.
Yeah, the one thing I'd say about Cloud9 is that Licorice has had a few shaky performances. You don't notice these things because they're stomping the game so badly, but his set against COG definitely had a few troll set ultimates. His Vladimir today, while I do like picking something new into set, he kind of missed a few flank opportunities, and like Sven and Vulcan had to have those crazy outplays in order to win the fight. You guys had Soaz on the desk after the day. It was like our State Farm Assist of the Week or something, was the Tom Kench consume onto Senna at a fairly crucial, Devour, in a very crucial Baron fight. But like Soaz missed his E-stun on Vulcan, right? Like that team fight was really close to being a disaster.
They could have also stolen Baron as well because Blabber was actually outside of the pit. So I felt like that comp was really hard to execute from C9, and it was them pushing themselves a little bit further, and they got, I think, a little bit close to the fire today. Like we started to see what does it take for Cloud9 to lose a game, and to me it looks like don't give them tools that are easy to execute. Like when they're playing compositions that are hard, because anytime you're playing Lee, Zoe, and you don't have any other engages, you are really asking for trying to outplay your opponents. And first day, Cloud9 was playing things like Veigar. That is so much easier to play than the Zoe pick. So I feel like this is them understanding, hey, we can't get complacent. We need to constantly be testing ourselves, and we're not afraid to potentially put ourselves at a disadvantage.
Yeah, I agree with your overall sentiment, although I feel like Zoe is doesn't require other people to set up, whereas Vhagar kind of needs you to like the team play around it. Otherwise, we maybe see more Vhagar, but that's like
I guess it's the ease of execution from cage into
for
you
the
have an
team
instant
composition,
fight.
like starting the fight. Did I ever tell you at the start of the season how I was playing a lot of like Senna bot lane farm share stuff?
No, I didn't know you were playing it at the start of the season.
Oh yeah, I was playing it like when Senna released.
Okay, so that's why you knew everything.
This is why I have so much like Senna Soul tech in my brain, and why I liked seeing them actually doing this. So for people that have listened to all the JLXPs, you've probably heard this before, so apologies. But yeah, what I was doing is we're actually doing double support item bot lane, because if you're not in like Challenger or something, you can still get 6 CS per minute with both support items, and then you can double farm share and get the Relic Gold. And that's when you could still get Senna Soul drops. So that was a way of keeping enough Senna income to get Manamune, but then also having enough souls to take advantage from the immense soul power.
Okay. How did it change with the patch for you then?
Well, we ended up getting to like D2 with it, and I just started losing a bunch, so I kind of stopped playing. But this particular patch, we haven't played it yet, but like when I was theory crafting it, the only change is, okay, Senna should never last hit cannon. The other person should last hit cannon. But then when they also said, if a relic last hits cannon, you don't drop it, then it started getting like, okay, how many hoops are we really going to jump through? Are we no longer going to do double relic? Is it going to be like a spell thief support with the relic support?
So I want to ask you
probably where we go.
About Senna then, because I was also playing a ton of Senna at the start of the split, but as AD exclusively.
Yeah.
And I ran into the problem that Blitzcrank obliterates me.
Yes.
What support were you playing with that? Because I feel like we have not seen enough people give Blitzcrank a chance in the LCS. To me, that pick right now should be really powerful.
I mean, Ignar played it once.
Yeah.
I feel like the reliability is just so low.
I actually disagree, because you're not looking entirely at hook. The ultimate, I think, is actually one of the biggest...
you just walk up and you ult them.
Yeah, so ult guarantees you a hook right away, basically. Like you ult hook, they're not going to get out of it if you have the mechanics. And in a team fight, I've won so many fights just timing for somebody to look for an engage. Like, for example, Set goes into your fight, the second he lands, silence. And then you pile him, he'll usually die because he can't get the face breaker off. Everybody can pile onto him. So that spell, I've also seen Silas's steal and win fights with it.
Huh. I mean, Nautilus, Leona, any aggressive support can just dunk on Senna.
Yeah.
Which is why you always see it paired with Tahm Kench and Braum, because you need the peel.
That's why you were playing Braum?
Yeah. No, we were doing Solo queue. We're doing Sona Senna. Because if you hit mid game, it's just a free win. Like you both scale so ridiculous. If you don't need to win lane with that, you need to not power feed and then just win the game.
It might actually be better too now that Sona has made more of a laner, and so is Senna.
Yeah, but the whole point of this was to get back to like kind of explain more in depth the soul tech that Sven was taking advantage of. Never last hitting cannons, because you always get the drop rate. Early on in laning phase, because it's a 25% drop rate on minions you don't last hit, he's gathering every soul. And if you look at the gold value of the soul, it's 1 AD per soul, and every 20 souls you gain range. So when I did the math, it was like almost 50 gold per soul.
No.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah. Because, I mean, 1 AD is already 35 gold.
Yeah.
Right? And then if you're trying to factor in range and the fact that it can give you crit chance as well, right? It's upwards of 50 gold per soul. So that's why it's so crucial that you don't take cannons. Because one person gets full cannon value, and then Senna also gets 50 gold, right? So you're creating value, and it's this weird balance between Senna. Like, sure, Senna scales off of items, but in comparison to how much you're scaling off of souls, gold is kind of just less valuable on that
if
kit.
You have another tool to get it.
You can get 100 AD from souls, which is what Sven did. He had 100 souls by like 24 minutes because he did the cannon thing. He missed out on a lot of CS intentionally when someone else was there to do it. What I liked is he was still taking CS when it needed to be pushed fast, or if there was no one else there, because you still do benefit from items. And the biggest thing that he did that I've been preaching is, when possible, he followed around his jungler.
Yes.
Because we've tuned the cannon minions and stuff.
That's what I do, yeah.
Senna Souls in the jungle are not tuned. Krugs can give you 5.
Raptors sometimes like, oh, here's
Raptors
like 4.
is like 3 or 4,
Yeah.
depending on how it drops. So I think that's also even higher on this last patch when it went from 20 to 25%. Not completely sure on that, but that's how Sven got so many souls.
Another crazy value of Senna that's often overlooked, and I forget the name of the item, but it's a new Duskblade item, the one that kills wards upon sight.
Umbral Blade. That's what's Sven Rush.
Unbelievable item. That item is so powerful.
Especially because you can auto Q and one-hit any control ward. Or actually just one-hit a normal ward.
And it's coming from your AD, so you don't ever have to get
like
out of
800
position
range
to
on
kill wards.
Yeah. No, Umbral Blade is really goofy and a item that probably scales better in Pro as well, just because the abundance of wards and how quickly you can scale them. Anyway, Cloud9, still dominant. The question that people end up asking, and I want to get your thoughts on, is how much of this 10-0 and potential 18-0 is C9 dominating, and how much is it that the 2nd and 3rd and 4th and 5th place teams aren't what we would normally expect from like a 2nd place team? C9 being good versus other people being bad, and where is your line?
More towards Cloud9 being good right now. Definitely there. But I also do believe that the other teams are all underperforming. I don't think...
It's a bit of both. That's kind of what I said.
Like, I think the junglers particularly are not really understanding what they should be doing for their team right now, and Blabber has had a head start in having the aggression necessary for this current iteration of League, while having access to a team that he's already been used to for so long, because some of the parts of Cloud9 he's already worked with, so it's very easy for this highly aggressive jungler to slot right on in and synergize with Nisqy very well. So to me, the main synergy in Cloud9 that's making them work this way is Nisqy and Blabber that no other 2v2 so far has. I mean, you're seeing the Leesman from Blabber with the invade with Licorice level 1 yesterday at the Krugs against Wiggly, making Wiggly look like an absolute buffoon at the first Raptor camp as he has to smite and flash out. I mean, no other team is doing that. No other team says, we have an advantage with these champions right now. How can we press it? And I think that's what Cloud9 is doing it, because they have just thought about the game more. I think all the other teams are in their own head thinking about, what is our identity? What is all these what are our players do? You know, what about the lessons that we learned yesterday? Should we be focusing on early or late game versus what just can we do in this game right now? Like, what are our win conditions? And it was nice to hear from Vulcan in a SOT that we played that, yeah, that is what they're doing. Like, before every fight, it's like, what are the key cooldowns? What are the main abilities that we need to watch out? Who do we want to prioritize? You know, if I'm Syndra, before every fight, I need to press tab and see who's got MR. All right, that's the target I should go on. If I'm Elise, I'm not going to use my cocoon on a target with Merc Treads. I'm going to be looking for the guys that don't have tenacity.
I mean, so, okay. I haven't been on a pro team in a while. You have more recent pro experience than me, but like stuff like that is stuff that I would always want to talk about before or after team fights. Yeah, like you want to get on the same page of what you're supposed to do, and then if a fight doesn't go right, you want to figure out what happens. I feel like a lot of teams don't do that.
No, and it's so
like
at least
your teams.
From my experience, it was what we wanted to be the default, yet we never got to the groove of every single time doing it, because the amount of times you have to be doing it, you realize can fill the entire space of a game. Yeah. Where, oh, I can do this, I can do that.
And meanwhile, you lose focus on something else and someone dies, and then the game's just over.
And a lot of teams fall into the trap of, we have all the information, we know everything that is going on, yet we don't have the courage to say, let's do something off of this. So taking the step from information into action is something that's really stopping a lot of teams down.
And how quickly you can synthesize that is what Cloud9 does really well. And I think this segues really well into scaling, because C9 doesn't necessarily play scaling drafts. Like, there's been a lot of, I mean, Ornn is just a champ that should be picked every game it's up because it's actually pretty good early mid and then very good late.
Crushed lanes.
Right? But you told me before this podcast, and we haven't had the conversation yet that I want to have here, is like, you have a way of talking about scaling that you wanted to try and
so I'm
introduce?
thinking about what scaling should be, because I did the draft defense, and I was talking to Vedius about it earlier. Like, what should scaling be? Not just this because I think right now it could be this arbitrary, oh, they're just stronger as the game progresses, right? Later in the game, at magically 40 minutes, 35 minutes, you just have the stronger composition. But I just don't think that does any justice to what we're actually trying to define. So I think that in scaling, first of all, it's relative to the other team. So, if you have, say, a Kog'Maw, you could say this is the most late game AD I can think of. I can pick a Twitch and I can beat your Kog'Maw.
Which is actually funny because when people say Kog'Maw is this late game hypercarry, I always say, no, Kog'Maw is actually like a 2 or 3 item hypercarry. The items he builds doesn't multiply into a 6 item build.
He's not building crit.
Yeah. Scaling is really, really complicated.
Yeah.
My view on it, if I can try and kind of sum this up, is like different champions have different power levels depending on how much gold they have.
Yeah.
Right? And the goal for a draft or a team composition, or even what defines the meta, is which combination is best. Like sometimes when we get early game metas, a lot of it is because the champions that are good early game are good enough late game for a quote
like a Jarvan.
Late game comp. Doesn't matter. Yeah, like a Jarvan or sometimes like Aurelia or something when she was good. But that's kind of my initial thoughts. You keep going.
Well, there's champions like Ryze too that also have really strong early into a good late game because you have tools to split push. So I think the late game becomes more so about the utility that you bring against your counterparts that allow you to make plays. And so I think the way that we should define it is more towards when are people fighting and when are these crucial moments where you really need to outscale or have your composition just be stronger than your opponent. And the timing seems to be that dragons are happening around the 22 to say 27 minute mark
is
for the
when
last
the soul would come
exactly
in.
When the soul comes into play. And so if we build it at that point, you must be able to fight for soul no matter what. I think every composition cannot argue from that.
Okay.
And so if a team is struggling with closing, then I would want to have a way to say they should prioritize not having a strong early game, but peaking at the point where they need to fight for the dragons. So, okay, if it's at 25 minutes, then how much gold can we average at 25 minutes? Like you're saying, what are these champions? And so from that structure, deciding, okay, if it's going to be 2.5 items, what champions at 2.5 items do we feel the most comfortable going up against these opponents?
And I think there's an added wrinkle to this is I like that you've identified the like 25-ish minute point and you can kind of approximate the gold values. But at the same time, you can draft literally the very best 25-minute team composition
and never get there.
But if you've lost 6 towers and you're down 12 kills, it's not going to matter because they're going to have 10,000 more gold than you. So there's always that balance. Do you have, what champions fit that mold the best? Because I think it is definitely not as simple as straight up 25 minutes. And you don't think that either.
Yeah.
You need what a lot of times we call like a bridge to get there, right? Like how can I withstand this first 24 minutes for what ends up being the game-defining fight?
So the first thing is, I think, in a sense of play style, is understanding that you're not trying to get an advantage early. You're just trying to slow the game down. So if I'm, say, playing mid lane and I know...
Do you think this is the best way to play? Like, if you're just trying to theory craft
So if I'm playing in NA and I'm trying to get wins and I'm trying to improve, I will play this way, where I will try to think, okay, if I need to survive mid lane, I would rather have my mid laner focus on a recall that's going to minimize the damage to their turret versus one where it's going to maximize their ability to influence the map. I don't need them to play make. I need them to hold as much gold as possible from the enemy's pockets and then start playing to that win condition. And so picks that can do that are champions like Orianna, Syndra, fairly safe early, and you're still going to be able to influence the team fights later. Bot lane, you got the Nautiluses, right? Okay, you can do a lot early, but you can also do a lot late. And you've got picks like Thresh, Rakan that also utilize that. They can serve as that bridge. But I think the priority is in wave clear and minimizing the damage you take to turrets. So in a situation where you're trying to slow the game down and you see the opponent go for a Rift Herald move, normally you would think, let's just trade. They're going for Rift Herald, we'd like to do that. But this could be a time where you think, let's just contest and see if we can cancel the Herald altogether. Can we just show up and have them back off? Because if you're playing that style, you're buying time. Exactly. So as long as you're constantly thinking not just about the individual abilities you have to track in the fight, but how you want to get to that moment, I think it becomes a lot easier.
Yeah, I do think that we are moving a little bit towards that 25-minute team fight stuff because the stuff that could potentially smash early either isn't working or isn't there, or people are able to neutralize it enough.
Yeah.
Right? But I also see teams like Cloud9 who, when they want to, can do it.
So, I mean, to me, the earliest attack, the most aggressive thing you can go is always Renekton and Elise. Like, I just don't think you get any more aggressive than than that kind of 2v2. Okay. And a big part of it is that Renekton is nerfed. So
he no longer has, that's the thing. He no longer has Sojin, so his late game is worse.
Yeah.
So with the same early game advantage, it won't be as strong.
So the champions that was the bridge for Renekton, right? He had that item was the bridge for the early game for a lot of picks as well. So now that that's not there, what kind of bridge are you looking for? And it's just not non-existent. So you have to move away from it because, I'm a big believer of just seeing the meta as some sort of current. Just go with the meta, go with the flow, go with what the game is essentially guiding you to play. And it might not necessarily balance because this is not some natural formation. It's just people deciding what they think should be strong or what should not be. But it's still having some general sense. I mean, the patch notes themselves tell you the direction that the balance team is thinking of going. So why not go in that direction? Because at least when I was on Dig, I remember the best win streak we had was when all we did was try to look at patch notes and think, what's the most busted thing we can abuse right now?
Sure. Yeah. This is... We've talked a lot about tactics and we've been pretty high level. I'll do like one level higher.
This is a high level podcast.
Yeah, there we go. It's interesting. I think most teams do the copycat league thing where they see someone else do something that works and then they try and play the same.
I think right now is the prime time for experimentation.
Okay, well, it's weird because what I heard from you there was a lot of let's do what the meta is. Isn't that copycat?
So, not do what the meta is, because it's do what the patch notes are offering.
Yeah. Okay, so that's what I agree. Because what I look at is when I was, playing Guild Wars like 10 years ago, and even when I played League early on, like I would look at what everyone else was playing, and then I would decide what I wanted to practice, because I didn't think that playing the same thing and trying to do it better than them would be my strength. So I'd gain my advantages by seeing what they do and then practice what that wasn't or what that would be naturally good against. That's going to be controversial, right? Because there are definitely LCK teams that, we're just going to be better than you at your thing.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how they won 7 world championships.
It can work if you're good at it.
And it can totally work. And what we've had this year, and we don't need to go super deep on this, at least a little bit at the start, is actual more regional differences. Like no one feels compelled to copy Korea anymore. And Korea typically doesn't copy other teams until they lose to it. So, and like within an international tournament. So we won't see that until MSI.
I think the reality for teams is that they are starting to see that the differences from region to region when it comes to international play actually become the strengths for the teams.
Yes.
So if you were not focusing on highlighting those differences, you're almost like being an individual. If you're not focusing on just being yourself when it comes crunch time to delivering what you have to offer, it's going to be weaker and they're going to read right through it because, you're playing the same thing they've practiced against. But if suddenly you have your well-oiled strategy that they're not used to, it can have the wonkiest champions, but it's yours. They have not practiced against it. You're probably going to come up with either a win or some sort of psychological advantage where now they're thinking, did we just practice wrong for a whole year? Which is what the world did after FPX won.
Yeah. Well, FPX won and then everyone wanted to play more early game. And then we're seeing a bit of a shift now.
It's not like FPX was actually drafting early game comps.
I mean, they're drafting Nautilus mid, but then they'd also have a Sivir.
Yeah. They
bridge with the Nautilus into having a late game Sivir.
And the GP. And it's not like Nautilus does not offer anything for the late game. He's got engaged. Same thing with a Malphite. Okay, you can lose lane. You always have a way to be useful.
Yeah. We also need to talk about TL. I want to talk about TL.
Let's talk about TL.
I don't think I told you my quip at the start of the day. Isn't it weird how every team keeps having their best game of the split against TL? Weird how that keeps happening, right? Or maybe, oh yeah, I have a list. EG, 100 Thieves, Dig, and Golden Guardians. I remember just like, because my mind, when I see the game, is like, man, no, this team's actually playing real well, but their opponent's always Liquid.
Yeah. Wow. What is that? What are you inferring from that?
So what I'm inferring is that Liquid's not doing anything.
Yeah,
like,
right.
They're just letting the other team play whatever game they want, and they're losing. And I think the past 4 splits of Liquid dominance has just conditioned me into thinking that if they lose, the other team must be clean.
I see.
Because you had to be clean to beat Team Liquid.
Yeah.
But like today, Ash Victor into like triple stone plate, and then Double F building Phantom Dancer 4th item instead of a Last Whisper, and them not even being able to successfully zone Sejuani out from a Drake steal on Drake number 2, like, and the fact that no one was moving with Elise in the early game, like that was just a lot of not clean Liquid play. And like, yes, Evil Geniuses played better and they, poked him with Zoe and then Bang scaled up on Ezreal and had like a successful game. But a lot of that looked like, trouble in TL land.
So during the Not My Hot Takes segments where we had to write these takes for other people to read, one of mine was that Team Liquid is donezo for the whole year.
Oh.
And this was weeks ago. Like, this was not even last year. This was just like, they are absolutely done. It's not coming back. It's over. And I still kind of feel that way about Team Liquid. And
man.
The reason being is a big combination, but one of the enlightening ones was I actually did spend about an hour and a half listening to the Weldon speaking about CLG and how CLG's first 3, I think it was even up to 4 weeks, that's how they had been going, including the boot camp.
Mm-hmm.
And what I noticed was that combined with what Soas was telling us about coming to America and what he felt like was the trouble for Team Liquid, is that when a lot of these teams are joining together for the first time, they're always with the expectation that their fundamentals are solid, that they can approach the game and know what playing 1-3-1 is. They can know a weak side, strong side. Basically, they think that they have the base level down. And so when they start playing and they realize we need to work on this, they start getting depressed because we're not as good as we thought. We thought that we knew how to do this. Now we have to start from zero again. It takes a toll on the confidence of players, especially somebody like Team Liquid that's been so far
4-time
up.
champs.
Get rid of Xmithy and now you have Broxa. You're going to have a lot going on through your head about what your team is actually capable of. But I don't think it's anything bad. I just think it's a natural course of things where when you have a new teammate, you need to reintroduce the
resync on the fundamentals.
Right. So you have to start from level 1 at every team iteration. And I think a lot of teams failed to do that in spring, whether it's Team Liquid or whether it's a team like Evil Geniuses where they think they have more in their pocket than they actually do. And then they always just realize sadly, oh, no, we don't. God, we suck. It's like, no, you just started on the wrong chapter.
Yeah, so I'm going to continue to give Liquid the benefit of the doubt, probably until they miss playoffs or lose in playoffs. And we'll see what happens on Monday Night League when they face Dignitas this week. But I like your analogy there where they need to start from, level 1, ground zero. And jungle is probably one of, if not the hardest positions to try and plug and play because every bit of the early game kind of has to run through them. And Brox has still only been here for like 9 days.
Yeah.
Like that's what I'll kind of keep coming back to. Everyone else. And it's not like, hey, he was here 9 days before the start of the split, and there were a lot of teams that were having this issue. No, he's here late. Everyone else has a month-long head start on getting their synergy together, and Liquid also has to catch up on that. And, like, even in the game today, their lanes were fine. Like,
do you recall the conversation around Broxa and the concern at the start of the year for him joining Team Liquid, that maybe his play style as somebody that would sacrifice himself for the lanes would not be as valuable? Because if I remember correctly, we were on the ESPN pre-show, and I had
Okay.
said, I don't know about Broxah because I feel
Yeah.
like the jungle could change. The role itself
Yeah.
was not decided.
Yeah, I talked about Xmithie too. I'm like, he's going to be good at adapting. I don't know about Broxah.
Exactly.
He hasn't been through many
hit it.
metas.
You're right. We were both on the money on what
Yeah.
was going to happen, and I think it did not favor Broxah. I think the game has shifted to a point where the jungler needs to be a lot more independent. And if you're picking Elise because you want to get your an independent jungler does not pick Elise. When you pick Elise, you're doing it for your team.
Yeah, you have to gank. So, okay, I think at this point everyone's saying C9's the favorite for spring at least.
Yeah.
But I still see C9 having their biggest competition come playoffs as being TL.
Okay.
Are you?
No.
Do you want to get in? Do you want to say?
I actually said it.
Like, are you
week
set
one.
now? TL is not even top 3.
Yeah,
this split?
I'm set. Not top 3.
How low are they? Are they gonna make playoffs? They're ninth right now.
I think they'll make playoffs.
Okay.
I think they'll make playoffs, but I don't think top 3. No way. They're too far behind.
Well, not in the regular season, but like, they'll win the quarterfinal matchup against whoever they match up with.
It's tough to say for playoffs because Impact clearly does not give a shit about spring, but he will definitely.
Why do you say Impact doesn't care about spring?
He doesn't care dying. Like, he never cares about spring. Like, just as a person, he never cares about regular season. Like, this is
this
a
why
team.
C9 never won titles?
Yeah, maybe. But
but Impact. So I will say Impact was really happy when Team Liquid won spring in 2018.
yeah, but that was when they won the entire tournament, not the regular season.
Oh, right.
So he will try his absolute best when it's playoff crunch time. But when it's regular season games, we know that Team Liquid does not perform. It was, I think, the same conversation last year before MSI, where it was, how good is Impact? We think he might be the best top laner, but internationally he doesn't get tested. Suddenly shows up internationally. You're like, what, you could do this all the time? Like, why weren't you not doing this in spring? And it turns out that for them, after playing for so many years at such a level, it's better to conserve their energy that way.
I want to end the TL composition with something that I read on Reddit.
Okay.
It was a very good comment.
All
Did you
right.
see any of the post-match thread?
Not
of the TL
yet.
game?
I saw one thing, but it was about CLG, and it was really funny.
This is kind of about CLG.
Okay.
This is directly stolen from the post-game Team Liquid Reddit thread of other people. I'm sourcing here. After losing in the 2019 Gauntlet Series, Weldon Green, the head coach of CLG, went for an early morning stroll along the beach to meditate and clear his mind after a long split. As he walked, he stubbed his toe on something metallic. It was a genie lamp. This conversation. You have freed me, so I shall grant you 3 wishes. But I'm not as powerful as I once was, so I can only grant, second best wishes. Okay, I need to do everything that's second best. So he says, he knows Irene is leaving as coach. He says, okay, for a strategic coach, I want one that's coached for a Worlds team. Granted, you get Song. He'll join your team. Weldon thinks a little bit more. I wish for a former world champion mid laner. Granted, said the genie. Crown will be available and he will join your team. He's got one wish left. He says, I wish for CLG to finish just 1 spot behind Team Liquid. And miles away in his mansion, Steve Liquid, Aaron Set bolted upright from sleep in a cold sweat. It's genius.
That's a good move.
Because Team Liquid is in 9th right now in the standings.
Okay. I love when genies are always just sneaky. Like, everything you wish, you needed to be a little bit more specific. No, the one I saw about CLG was just a lot meaner. It was something like, my dad beats me, my mom beats me, but I stick with CLG because they don't beat anyone.
Oh, no. Okay. Yeah. Well, let's talk about Immortals. I have a note here in my rundown, Immortals finally 0-2. And I don't say this in a bad way, but every week I come in and say, surely Immortals is not going to be 9-3 or something. And this week, there was definitely a little bit of a return to some of the expectations. Seeing Immortals at 5-5 in the standings feels much more accurate to me. Preseason, I had them 9th.
Yeah.
So I definitely feel like they have outperformed my expectations.
Significantly.
But not to a second place team. This just feels right.
I think they might not have even performed expectations from themselves, rather playing out of their mind, but because the competition around them was, I think we gauged it to be better than it currently is. I think a lot of us thought that we're going to have a lot of teams that are either Cloud9 level or close, at least Team Liquid. Like we thought at least 2, maybe 3 teams at TSM got their act together quickly enough.
Yeah.
But because that hasn't happened, I think that's why Immortals gets all these wins. And it feels like they shouldn't have them, but for the circumstances, they definitely earned them.
Yeah. So, like, the Ica story is going to continue on for the rest of it.
What was the expectation from Ica, though? Like, because I feel like, is he not playing exactly what we expected?
He is, actually. I think for a lot of people, they were expecting him to not be that great, and he hasn't been that great.
Yeah.
But you just didn't expect them to be able to pick up 5 wins with that being stand. What I think, so the expectation when Zabutin was propping up Ica is that he will develop into a good mid laner. That takes time.
Right. I mean, if I have a tiny seed, I can say it'll turn into a sequoia seed at some point as well.
That'll take a couple hundred years, Crumbz. So, anything else you want to talk about? LCS
I think for
LEC?
IMT, Altec has been the pleasant surprise for me.
Yeah.
At least at the start. I mean, it's expected that it wasn't going to be a completely upward trajectory for them, but definitely nice to see that there's a North American AD that's been on, I believe, 13 teams before Immortals.
Whoa.
A lot of them were like team into academy, into the team, into academy for short amount of time.
He's been around since like 2014 NALCS.
Yeah.
With EG, with Pobelter.
I like seeing these players that are just on the cusp and still wanted to be a part of it, because to me it just reinforces the desire of the players in the ecosystem, and it's just nice to see that they can still compete.
Yeah, and to that end, it's one reason that I'm not super depressed that Liquid's 3-6. Like, it's good that they can't just win all the time.
You were that invested in Liquid.
Well, no, okay, every year you want your best teams to be as good as possible.
Oh, you still haven't given up on the world stream?
Not 100%.
Oh, I see.
I mean, last year I did. Last year I bailed. I didn't have any NA teams making out of groups in 2019. But, like, Liquid made a semifinal last year. Cloud9 made a semifinal of Worlds the year before that. Like, that back-to-back has been powerful Worlds performances. You look at the global landscape right now, right, with LPL on hiatus, with LCK playing a different style, that there's a lot of question marks of how dominant that is going to be. And LEC with 6 teams that are one game between each other at the top of the standings.
Top 4 are tied now. Yeah,
top 4 are tied, and then 5th and 6th are only one game back, which is just crazy. And then you have C9 dominating, or Liquid theoretically upgrading with Broxa. Like, that's the idea of, like, hey, I'm at least interested in watching them play on the world stage.
Always interested.
Yeah. But not for like some guilty pleasure of I love seeing them lose. Yeah. No, I actually do want to see them win. So, but the overall point is, I think it is a good thing that if Liquid come into spring and Impact doesn't usually try in spring regular season, and Doublelift comes into the split and looks a little bit out of practice, and their jungler doesn't have practice with the team, other professional teams should be able to beat you.
Of course.
And it's happened. Like, there's definitely a case where that hasn't happened.
You thought that if they got away with this, it would have been just terrible for the league.
Kind of. Yeah. For just like the competitive structure of the league.
Absolutely. Imagine if we didn't have Cloud9, right? If everybody was in the soup.
Yeah.
Oh my God. We would not be looking forward to international tournaments.
Well, do you think we can go to LEC. Do you think there's an LEC soup? Because it's 7-3 is their first place tie. And then I think they have some actually decent teams at 6-4 as well, because I think it's like Rogue has looked pretty good.
I like the Rogue Misfits game.
Yeah, and I think Mad Lions is the other team at 6-4. Misfits, Fnatic, G2, and Origin are all 7-3. What did you see this week in LEC that jumped out?
Misfits in particular, I think, is the really interesting one for me. I think the jungler Razork is somehow the guy operates on a different level. Like, it seems like he's just at the right place, the right time around Fevivan, which is another player that was really surprising, because this is the results of the Misfits. He was in Misfits, right, last year. Yeah. Right, so him, Soaz, a few others. It's the result of the Misfits implosion. It was
the Max Lore, Soaz,
a complete
Hansama,
year
Gorilla.
of failure, and suddenly a player that we thought was, I wouldn't say like almost got on Misfits from luck, but he got on Misfits after coming from NA.
I mean, listen,
So it was so weird to see him now still be an amazing player and a leader.
I think people just thought he was washed.
Yeah.
And I think, so I really enjoyed the LEC's pregame coverage of Febiven, weirdly, like right before they lost to Rogue, because they did end up losing the game before. But what they did is they did like his journey through, hey, this amazing start on Fnatic, makes the huge run at Worlds, doesn't work quite that well with Schalke, comes to NA for 2 years, has one good split, then falls off, goes back to Europe, falls off again. For a lot of players, that's just the end of their career.
Yeah, it looked like it.
Yeah, but I think he has improved from that point, which is really cool.
When I hear him speak, and this is something I've been really paying attention to and really look for in interviews from players and coaches, is what kind of language are they using when they're communicating about their team or what they're looking for practice. And it is so clear to me that Febiven has gone from someone who has his dad on Twitter post a bunch of memes that are so inappropriate to somebody that is so mature in leading the team by example, knowing that his actions will be what determines what the rookies follow, not so much what he thinks should be happening. And that kind of attitude, I think, is something that a lot of European players are starting to realize when they go to North America and come back. Because you see that if you're from EU and you're trying to lead somebody in NA, you're not going to convince them to take up your play style or to take up whatever ideas you have about the game by just telling them. You need to show them. You need to embody it. And I see him doing that right now, and I think it's really rallying the players around, because I would not be surprised if some of the players on Misfits also thought that he might have been washed up when they got onto him. We're like, well, he's a legendary player at some point, but I don't know what he's been doing lately. I'll give it a shot. And that kind of leadership is so important that I don't see a lot of other players do. And we have seen in the past players like Hai, I think, were really good at just expressing what they're expecting from their team.
I think there's been so much good coverage of Febiven. The last thing I'd wanted to add in would, I think Prawley and Amazing talked about it well back in like 2015. He was, have you heard the term like European ego kid?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was so apt for what Febiven was there. It's like, Prawley told the story about how he was in draft, is like, theoretically, they're going up against Syndra, Xerath, 2-trick in mid. So Prawley's the coach, is like, yep, we should ban Syndra and Xerath. And Febiven like, no, give him Xerath. I know how to beat it.
No.
Right? Like that mentality. Like, I'm so good, I'll beat anything.
This is the guy that took Zed into Faker.
Yeah. I mean, that's the counter matchup.
Yeah.
So that's good. That's the smart move.
It is, but it's still Zed. So he still lost.
That's ego kid right there. Do you think Misfits will stay at the top of the standings, or do you think G2 or Fnatic will move up? Because what I kind of saw this week, it's hard, even with all the clumping in the standings, that I still don't expect G2 and Origin and Fnatic to emerge as the contenders by the end of the year. G2, not because of what I've seen in game, more just because of what I've seen in the past.
Yeah, from last year.
Yeah, and there are definitely more question marks being raised about, like, not only Caps' bottom lane play, but Perkz actually looking like he took a year off of mid lane in a few of those instances, right? Like, he hasn't dominated completely every game. His Silas was a little bit shaky. And overall, that team just, like, not sinking, but I still expect them to.
Did you watch the Sejuani game? Did you watch the early game of the Sejuani game for G2?
I watched both. I watched their Karthus game.
So, do you remember when Jankos was just lurking bot lane at the alcove looking for a gank like at level 4 or something?
I think so, yeah.
That's the kind of play that I see that immediately makes me think that's a losing play. Like, this is a team that's clearly struggling because it is not fluid, right? That's not a play that you're making hoping, like, creating a situation for yourself. That's a play that you're making hoping that the enemy oversteps. And every time, every second that goes by that they're not making that play, you are losing experience, you are losing goal, and that's not what we used to see from G2.
G2 has been the team that is fully pressure all the time.
Exactly. Super fluid, always looking to make something and maximize gold. And seeing them revert or at least go for that kind of play is something that puts a lot of questions in my head as to what is going on with the direction of the team, because I imagine that the shot calling structure has also shifted. It probably was Caps doing more shot calling from mid jungle before.
Yeah, because you move through the mid
now
lane.
you have perks, and you weren't talking to perks that much before. If you were a jungle, like why would you talk to your AD?
Yeah.
Now that synergy is something that I think we haven't touched on before, and those are another area of the game that I think is super important. The synergy is not just between like mid jungle, but what is jungle AD, what is jungle top, what is support and top, AD and top, like in a team fight, and that dynamic needs to be reestablished.
Yeah. And it'll take some time. I still expect them to be like super dominant.
Well, you can't be a team that role swaps every other week without being pretty darn good.
What do you think of the Fnatic Origin game? Did you catch that one?
I did not. I did not catch that
one. So it was interesting because Ornn and Soraka both got through. So Origin was blue side. They B1 Soraka. And then Pantheon Ornn actually ended up coming in for Fnatic.
Oh, that was the Pantheon top Ornn mid, right?
Yeah.
And Talia jungle?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So like just mega globals. And what I didn't like about this game, I've loved Origin's drafts for like most of the year. I really hated the Ryze. And I thought it got punished so much. So they ran a Ryze
mid against Soraka.
No, Ryze. So they had Ryze Soraka as their team comp.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
So they had no safe wave management ever.
Like
what ended up happening.
What was their AD? Like,
I will tell you in
they have like a Braum,
second.
a Gragas.
Yeah, but I remember from that game, as I'm pulling up this team comp, is I remember they had MF AD carry, Rek'Sai jungle, because a bunch of phase 2 junglers ended up getting banned, and Nautilus support. So like Soraka can just win you 5v5 games if you bring like 5v5 initiation and not a 1-3-1 mid laner.
It can't just be Soraka. She needs a team.
It was too much of a desync with the Ryze and the Soraka, but overall it was exciting to see Fnatic. A lot of the Fnatic wins this year for me have been them like kind of just messing up, and then the other team goes to an objective and Fnatic just like kills them. Because Bwipo's so good at fighting, and they usually have, like, Reckless is so good at fighting, and they're just winning these team fights. This win felt much more like, oh, this is good Fnatic. Like, this is the Fnatic that makes their own plays well.
I also think that Talia is S-tier jungle, has never not been an S-tier jungler. And I've spoken to a lot of junglers here. Why are you not playing Talia?
What do they say?
Ping. Practicing her on 60 ping versus
that's a very thresholdy skill shot.
And not just Talia, but champions like Nidalee that we saw Xerxes play as well. So Nidalee's into the cart. Like all these really mechanically intensive champions are just being left by the wayside. But yeah, sorry, that detracted from Origin Fnatic.
That's fine. I've basically said what I needed to say about that game. It's compelling when they have that many teams at the top, but I guess my final question will be, I think by the end of the split, G2, Fnatic, Origin are the top 3. Do you think Misfits is there already, or are you just mainly like excited because Misfits is so much better than people expected?
I would put Misfits up there. I definitely really like what I'm seeing out of them right now. I mean, it's a team that went budget this year, right? They definitely went with players that were not as expensive as last year.
Sure.
I can definitely
Razor,
go with that.
B-Boy.
Yeah. And so I think they're a lot more open and flexible to whatever happens, and just looking to improve versus the expectations of G2, Fnatic, and Origin that are so established. Like everybody's thinking that these teams all have to be at the top, whereas Misfits can quickly sneak by and say, hey, we're here. Yeah. No one thought anything of us, and we're still not taking... People still don't know where to place us and use that as their advantage. So I think
FlyQuest of the LEC.
Kind of, but at least FlyQuest is planting trees. What are Misfits doing?
I mean, Feb event storylines, man. That's what
we just get good stories.
Yeah, they're creating legacy. I had one other thing I think that I wanted to.
Well, I think we stumbled on one. It's that the NA jungle champion pool is tiny.
Karthus.
So bad compared to everywhere else in the world, and so bad as in it should be bigger. And Karthus is amazing. Yes.
Yeah. So, Karthus.
Yes.
I have some qualms with the way people talk about Karthus.
Okay.
When I saw Yankos' Karthus game, they made this big point about he pressed R at the right time, and that's all you have to do with Karthus. Karthus is really hard in your early jungle clear and landing Qs and really complicated. So,
wait, what part?
So this is an underestimated thing, and I want you to do this because you're still a pretty good jungler.
Mm-hmm.
Go in a practice tool, and without a leash, do a full clear starting at blue.
Oh, you mean from kiting the minion, the monster?
Just how fast you can clear the jungle.
Mm-hmm.
So we have a playtester, Albert, here, who's a good Karthus player, and I had him do like, hey, give me like a good Karthus clear. And he got one in 304, which is fast. In Academy, COG's Academy jungler did Karthus and actually did the same full clear in 311.
Okay.
Emin, our producer, one of our producers on LCS, he's a Mastery 5 gold Karthus player, cleared in 330. I just feel like the difference between a like highly executed, good Qs, good kiting, good auto weaving, good e-tapping Karthus is really hard. And like people that watch Karthus, I'm not even talking about like pros. Like pros take a lot of this stuff for granted. But even then, like Academy jungler, I think the best possible Karthus full clear is 3 minutes flat.
So I'll tell you, Karthus was actually the first champion I ever bought in League. In fact, it was the first champion I ever played. It was because I didn't know that cooldown reduction was capped, and I thought I could have 100% cooldown reduction. But
and just ult all the time. It's going to be so OP.
I did not read that much about the game back then. But I don't think Karthus is strong clear either. Like I think his strength comes from once you hit Ludens, you can non-stop farm without moving.
Well, I think his first clear is because he can get level 4 before Scuttle Crab spawns.
Yeah.
Which a lot of junglers can't do. I mean, in Pro, it's actually very rare that happens because people can invade you and you're usually doing a different path. But I think it's one of his, like, at least in Challenger or high elo.
Like he farms quickly, but when he starts really to create a discrepancy with the other jungler is when you have that item. Without that item, you are not really any better than, I don't know, an Olaf, because the Olaf can farm even faster than you. So I think the pick itself needs protection in the early game.
Yeah.
It's not a, hey, let's just pick, and it's getting exploited by picks like
Nidalee.
More like Leesmans or Kha'Zix, just a lot more aggressive picks. And I think that even though it can get punished, NA is not playing those picks to punish. Hell, there's not even junglers that are really trying to invade and kill you besides Closer and Blabber. So if you're not playing against those two guys, you can probably get away with a Karthus really early on and just have an absolute menace that puts pressure on the opponent to make a play. And because the plays are not as clean, you'll probably be able to clean up.
One final thing on jungling. I'd pulled this stat earlier on in the week, but I never got a chance to use it. LCK versus LEC versus LCS junglers in terms of patterns. LCK as a league averages 10 more CS at 15 than either LCS or LEC junglers. So
they're
like
farming more.
Yeah, we're talking about like NA is farming. NA is actually farming just as much as LEC and have about the same jungle proximity as LEC. LEC's early game kills are still up because I think they're more willing to go for like 50-50 tower dives. But LCK is legit way more just kind of handshaky farm off. I just think it's interesting. I don't necessarily know if there's a bunch of analysis that needs to be done.
I mean, from what I've seen with the LCK, and I haven't watched as much as LEC this year, or at least this week, I feel that the region itself, and I get a lot of this just from hearing what casters like Cloud Templar are talking about, or hearing, say, Ambition have a stream and hear what his thoughts on the game currently are, because they are allowed to co-stream it and watch the games as well.
Yes.
And so it seems like the LCK itself is just trying to understand its own identity at the moment. And so whether they are farming late or farming early, they don't even know if that's the right way of playing the game, because they're very prideful, and losing to China is a really big deal to the LCK. Like, that really hurts. I mean, even just Korean friends that I know that follow League are seriously hurt that they have lost to China. And so I think that the region is just trying to experiment and see if what worked for them before, which was that more controlled approach, could be used again.
And then there's the other side of the coin where Genji and Dragon X just like the game 3 of that series was just nuts. They did like Callista Pantheon and just dove in over and over. So they occasionally do the other side of the spectrum. Right now they're way more controlled.
So it's the time to experiment. This is such a good time to experiment with picks, with random picks as well, whether it's back to the Pantheon Talia bottom lanes or whether it's a different jungler like Diana jungle. I think even champions like Nocturne are actually going to be making a comeback right now, and it makes sense as to why. You can farm early. You can actually be pretty strong early on. We've seen last year teams like Griffin dive level 3 with a Nocturne.
Yeah.
It's possible, and you actually have a way to engage and influence the game pretty significantly. So I just think that teams, for some reason, are not taking advantage of the beautiful opportunity that spring is when championship points are no longer there.
Yeah. Oh, I was literally ready to wrap up and be like, any final thoughts? But you brought up championship points. And actually, I think, and there's a very small subset of the community that's saying, like, I can't believe the championship points are gone. I don't see that as that big of a deal. Like, I don't think that teams were actually saying, let's make sure we show up on time today, boys. Otherwise, we'll miss out on those championship points. Like, no, you show up to get better, to win on Saturday and Sunday, to make playoffs, and to win the split. Like, if your motivation was actually championship points, I don't believe you.
No, no one's ever thought about championship
exactly.
points. Even FlyQuest didn't know that they were participating in the gauntlet last year because they forgot about championship points.
Okay, cool. So we're aligned there. I think you try, like, Spring Split is exciting because you're getting back in there, you're trying to be as good as possible, and ultimately you're trying to win the split.
Yeah.
And if people say MSI doesn't matter because it doesn't carry over to Worlds, like, I completely disagree. Look at what happened to G2 off of their MSI win. Right? Like, that launched them into relevancy in a sense. Like,
and not just that MSI win, the MSI finals in Brazil where they got to finals as well against SKT.
That was huge. That was G2's redemption.
Yeah.
Right? When that happened. And just like NA fans still remember when CLG made it to MSI finals in 2016.
The largest format change was the Monday games, not championship point. Monday games changed everything because now, I mean, the league itself before Monday games felt like just one continuous stream of consciousness almost, or you're just like game, practice, game, practice, game, practice, game, practice. And now it's even more of a endless practice routine. I mean, think about a team that has to play, say, a Saturday and a Monday game, right? You show up on Saturday, you're not taking Sunday off because that's not the break team that all the other teams are playing. And so what do you do with that time?
I mean, what about LCK? They've been playing 5 days a week for like a couple years. Right? That would be even more so.
I think it's hard for me to say for the LCK because they've done that for all the time, and we just have to get used to it.
Yeah, the shift is actually quite meaningful in terms
it's the
of how
shift.
teams
like
practice.
if we had 5 years with this, it's not a problem. But it's that this is the year where it's happening. So now the teams are starting to have you shift your break day to Tuesday, but let's say you played on Monday, and now you have to play that Saturday. Okay, now you have Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday to prep a practice or a strategy. Like, how do you even use those 3 days when you have LCK that will play some games? Like, let's say if they play a new strategy on that Friday, how do you even adjust to Saturday's composition? Like, it's a big mess, and so you have to rely even more on yourself, and the teams that aren't willing to take what their players are giving to them as strengths are really gonna suffer, and I think that's what we're also seeing.
Yeah. Any final thoughts on either league or something random? Mark talked to me about sine waves last week.
Yeah, something random.
Yeah. If you have nothing, we don't need to force anything. We can just wrap up the podcast.
I did get a new book. I'm just starting, so I've never been much of a fantasy or sci-fi reader.
Okay.
I was always
Did Azale give you a recommendation?
No.
Okay.
I would always be
reading. He's the fantasy reader recommended.
I'm sure when I tell him what I'm reading, he would just be, because I'm reading Dune.
Oh, tell me how it is.
So I'm two chapters in.
I'm a bad fantasy reader. I'll usually read like 2 or 3 chapters, get hooked, and then get distracted.
Yeah.
So I read the first 2 chapters of Dune. I'm like, this will be a doozy to get through, but I hear it's great.
Oh, so you have read the first 2 chapters?
I don't remember them.
Okay.
Yeah, they're a doozy.
Yeah, I think it'd be really cool. I think the book is cool, but it's just like
do you normally read?
I normally read, but I read things that are more practical. I read like history, or I'll read I don't know, a new skill or a more esoteric
that feel
subjects.
practically applicable rather than fantasy entertainment stuff.
And so the interesting thing about this book is that it feels like a lot of the things that are embedded into it are actually practical, whether it's philosophies that the characters have or attitudes that are almost proverbial from the author, since it was written in the 60s, to something that is really relevant. And I got to that point from a book called Gates of Fire, which is a book about the 300 Spartans, that they're, that massive battle that was really famous where they defeated a bunch of Persians. And that was actually a really exceptional book, but I feel that it has an advantage and might be a good approach for people that want to get into these kinds of genres, because when I say a book about Sparta, so many of us already have ideas of what that looks like, right? We can imagine the setting. We might have seen the movie. We might have heard of the tales. So when you're reading it, it's very easy to use your imagination to figure out what's going on, what these people look like. But when you're having a sci-fi with a random name in the middle of some planet of nowhere where all these new technologies, like, what does that look like? And if I'm not used to that, I'm not going to get into it, and I'm just going to get distracted from the incredible effort I have to make in generating a new scenario versus just tweaking what I already know. Yeah,
I would also say some of the best fantasy books end up still teaching you something that's practically applicable, or some type of like societal lesson. Like even Harry Potter has.
What did you learn from Harry Potter?
So I took a Harry Potter class in the third year of university.
That's a great university that has Harry Potter classes.
It was like you did a lot of analysis of like the 7 Harry Potter books. I don't necessarily need to get into it too much, but like there are like class systems within Harry Potter, and there's right, if you think about it, right, that actually are pulled or could be considered to be pulled from real world scenarios. So it's like it's a very light like diving into what can end up being your understanding of society or what is fair or all these other things, like the fact that there was like, are you a half muggle, are you a full muggle, or are you a wizard, and all the like racism that was actually implicit in that. Like,
I guess that is racism.
Yeah. So, and they're teaching, like Harry Potter is teaching you like, no, don't think of it like this. Like pure blood versus like muggle is like, actually it's wrong. Look at Hermione. She's great. That type of stuff.
Wow. That gets Harry Potter dark.
And with that, I think, thank you for joining me, Crumbz.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, we'll have to do it again sometime.